this is where we got to, and I've had some thoughts over the last day about this, that I think there's some things that aren't right with what I've done so far, which doesn't surprise me because I usually get, it's an iterative process, and I usually go through several iterations before I get this right. And it is quite complicated, I think, this. Let's take the mesh off. But I think the thing about it is we've taken some time to get this, but it's a huge area. So if I get it right, then things will start to drop into place. And actually, I sort of look at the model, the rest of the model, and I'm thinking this is actually one of the more tricky areas. I'm thinking, but first of all, if I put the highlights on, so I'm going to use this ISAB one, and I've got that in the Y direction. So in other words, this is the way that the tangency of these, or the angle of that surface, develops in relation to the Y direction. There's a number of things that I don't like. I mean, now I'm looking at it, every time I look at this, I see something else that I don't like. I don't like the way this wanders off in that direction. This is certainly not correct at the minute, but I'm hoping that this will drop into place because it's sort of constrained on all edges once I get everything else right. The other thing I don't really like is the way that these highlights come down here and then they straighten off. They're completely straight at that end, and I want that to curve more. So I need to fix some of these things. At some point, I'm just going to have to accept that I'm not going to get perfection, because perfection takes a long time to do, and it's just a question of keep on, working away at it. But I don't. Yeah. Now I look at this again this morning, I'm thinking that doesn't look right. It's coming off that's coming off too quickly. It should be. I think it should be better if that was more parallel. That would hold this more parallel and then curve around rather than doing that S-ing. So I think that needs altering. And like I say, this doesn't look correct either. So I think what I'm going to have to do is, I mean, sometimes what I do, I get to a point like this and I think, well, I've got a model that's sort of almost complete in the sense that things join up. There's a little bit of an angle mismatch, but it's pretty small, and we could fix that if we wanted to. But sometimes I think I don't want to touch any of this, and I don't want to start creating multiple layers within here. And sometimes the easiest thing to do is just to duplicate the whole folder and just keep that old one there in case I need it. You notice that it switched off both of them because it highlights both of them. I always find that a bit annoying, to be honest, because I just want that one. I wanted that one switched on, not the other one. So by doing that, I know I've got a safety net. I can always go back to that one and find those surfaces without having to create lots and lots of, top one, top two, top three, and then I just end up in a mess. So I find this is actually better. Obviously, in time, I could get rid of V01, but I don't think, unless you're struggling for disk space, I don't care really how big the file gets. Particularly, I just want to get the job done. That's the thing. So in here, let's get rid of. So I will create another layer, which I'm just going to call whip 1. I always call them whip 1, whip 2 when I've run out of ideas for naming things, and I'm just trying to create something. So I'm just going to pick. I don't know whether I'm going to pick those surfaces, to be honest. I really want to go back to these original surfaces, which I'm glad I kept. So I'm going to look back at these original surfaces and work on those. So the original surface, this one here, was actually trimmed from this. So I'm going to copy that. I'll do Control-C, Control-V, and then copy that into there. So I know I've got it in the original, but I've also got a copy on whip 1, but I'm going to modify that. I might as well delete that because, well, I think it's the same. I think it's the same. Looks like we did extend it. That's the only thing, but I'm pretty certain that should be the same as that one. I just measured the distance between the two. Actually, they're completely different. So maybe I shouldn't go back to that original one then. Oh, let's get rid of that then. That's a shame. I'll leave that as it is then. So let me put that. I'll put that in whip 1. It just saves me having to isolate bits using the display. Sometimes you get, I'm going around visible, invisible, etc., and hide unselected, and rather than having to do all of that. This surface here, this one was a trim converted one, which again, I'm thinking about this. I'm not very happy actually that I trimmed it like this, or trim converted it like this. I've tapered it, and that means that if I need to change the section there because of the different lengths, it's not easy to do. If that was all the same length, if I just detached that from the main surface, then that would be a better thing to do, I think. So I'm actually going to get rid of that. And I want to go back to the original. So this was the one that I took that from, and I did a trim convert to a straight line there. I'm going to keep that surface there. I'm going to copy that, Control C, Control V onto there. So I'll go back to there. Hopefully I've kept the originals. I know I've got them in the surface ones, surface V1 anyway. And then let's see what we've got in there. So it's that a lot. So I think one of the things that's happened is I've got this surface and that surface. There is a gap between the two. Let's just extend that a bit further. I just want to overlap them a bit. I hope this is all going to work out. I think the problem I've got is that I really wanted the long surface there, to be honest. Maybe if I extend that. So let's duplicate that edge there. Sorry, I'm using my shelf. Shouldn't use that. I'll do it in here so that you can see what functions I'm using. I'm just duplicating that so I can remember where I've come from. So I'm going to extend that down here. Oh, this is where history catches you out. You can see this blend or this curve here because I've got history on there. So if we just pick all of the objects and delete all of the history, a good practice to do every so often. For that reason, there's other reasons. If you've trimmed something and you've forgotten that you've got a history on, you can sometimes end up with it trimming the wrong way. So the reason I've extended that is because I want to see some sections through there. So let's go back like we did before. So there's our Y section. So I just want to make sure that these surfaces are doing the same sort of thing, and you can see they're not. And at one time they were doing the same thing, but I think I've done some modifications to this surface when I was playing around with the surfaces before, and it's messed it up a bit. Right. So I can move that. I can move that hole up there, and I've got. Oh, this is a question actually, nothing relevant to this that people were asking on Discord, and it's one of those things that it was always puzzling to me, to be honest. In the past, let me just save this. It's not something. It's just while it occurs to me that in this menu here, if I go XYZ CV, you sometimes want to move a point by a certain amount, not very often, because you can. The way to slow it down is to increase the mouse sensitivity. So if you want to move that point by a certain amount, you can do it using mouse sensitivity. You can slow it down, but the other thing you can do is you can move it by a set step size, and you can lock that step size if you want to. So if I wanted to move that by 10 mil, and I'm just using 10 mil so we can see it. I need symmetry on these because I've deleted all the history on here. I do need to put symmetry back on these so that they don't mess up. So I'm just sidetracking a bit here, but with step size, if I put in 10 mil and I pick that CV there, for example, so that one there. If I bring in the information window, you can see the value of it, 1270 something. with the step size of 10 mil. If I go in the Z direction with the right mouse button, you can see it says 1 to 80, and if I undo that, if I go down here, it goes 1 to 60. So it does exactly what you'd expect it to do. This is in 2025, but in 2024 and 23, it doesn't seem to do exactly the right thing. But they seem to have finally fixed that, which I've always felt was a bug, that it didn't move that by the exact amount. But that's sort of just a side topic that somebody brought up in Discord, which I thought was worth sharing. Okay, so let's move this hull here. So I want to move that one. Don't want to constrain it in any way. I'm just going to put a bit of mouse sensitivity on it so it slows it down. I want to get these sections a bit closer to the section here. I'm just going to check something. I hope yeah, so I have got this back edge to this point. I think that's what changed, is that I had to raise this up to get to this back point. So let me just move that up again. So what we're trying to do here is get, in an ideal world, if these sections were all 100% the same on both of those surfaces, then we could literally cut those surfaces anywhere and they would join up without any need for aligning them. I don't really know what's happened here. I think I'm obviously messed up, but at some point, because I remember looking at this graph where we had, so we're looking at the deviation map, and I think I put in 0.5, and I measured the distance from there to there, and we need to specify the surfaces rather than mesh, and we got green all the way down the middle, which is what we've pretty much got there. I mean, there's no reason to make that more accurate than that particularly, but if you wanted to, you can increase the mouse sensitivity and just move that up and down. So that whole green area is now within 0.5, but not entirely necessary. So we want to now go into, obviously you can take that to whatever level you want, but so I want diagnostic shading to shade that off. So the sections, I mean, I'm looking at the Y0, not outboard, because outboard, the sections are not doing the right thing at all, in fact. But that's because I messed around with this surface here, and when we extend it, we start to see what the result of that is. So the other thing that we could do there then is to move these CVs here. So because I've got symmetry on, it's affecting that point as well. Bring that down so that the sections come together. I could, rather than doing that manually, I could actually align that just in position there, and that would give us a good idea as well. So let's take that off. Let me just put that deviation map on again. Always forget, you've got to press surfaces. Do that. So that back edge is now outside the 0.5, but I think if I bring it down, I've got mouse sensitivity 50 on, or bring it up rather. So it's going all green across the back edge, which means that all of this area is within 0.5 of a mil of each other, which is good. So as I say, we can now trim convert those anywhere we like within that area. I'm going to just switch on the old V1 because that's where I had that edge before, and I haven't quite got to that point. So maybe I should take that down a bit further. Doesn't have to be exactly the same point, of course, but I'll just take that down to here. The further you can overlap them, the better. If to see where both surfaces are going. That looks pretty good. Let's pick that surface, and we should be able to do curve evaluate there and change that from. It's not that one, is it? Which one is it? The surface evaluate. There we go. So I picked that one surface there, the one that we had the deviation map on, and you can see that under surface evaluate you've got deviation map and other things, but we want the deviation map on that we had before. And then if you wanted to make that even better, we can just pull these points around, try and get that as green in the center as possible, something like that. So that's sections. The other sections, of course, we could put the Y sections on. We will expect those to be different because of the curvature on the outside edges. That's why the sections here are going to be different in the Y direction as well. But the other thing you can do, which is more sensitive, but you don't want to do this until you've got the Y established. But if you put Z sections on, and we put, because they're very shallow, compared with where the surfaces are. If I make that to like 10 mil, we'll get loads of them, and that's even more sensitive measure of whether we're following the same sort of shape. Obviously, we're not on these edges where it's curving more, and that's what we're wanting anyway. But that's sometimes useful to do that. But the other thing that we want to do, having got the sections we're close there, is to look at the highlights again. So let's go back into diagnostics, ISO ang. Impossible to see when you've got them all over each other like that. You have to put create curves on and just show the curves to see what's happening there. So what I said about these highlights is that those the highlights there is a bit difficult to follow them, but I want that highlight to gradually come out to this point. And it's showing the right sort of, up to a certain point, it's showing the right sort of trend. Bearing in mind, we're going to cut this edge away and put another surface over the top of it. But I really want these ones to go in, and they wobble a bit here, but it doesn't really matter because all of this is going to be cut away eventually anyway. But we just want those to come in a bit. So I'm going to save that. And we'll take, I don't know whether, I mean, we've got this incredibly close to this surface, but I don't know whether it would be a good idea. I'm not really sure. If I was to bring that down, obviously that it's going to move away from the other surface, but the highlights start to be more consistent with the other surface. But having pulled that point down, we then have to move that point up. So I'm not sure whether this is a good idea or not, but it would make sense in the sense that the highlights are now going to be going more in the right direction. Let's just have a look at that and see what that does in terms of surface evaluation. So we're still within 0.5. It's just it comes in there. So let's move that point up a bit further. So we've got that back in the center, which is the important one. Actually, that's quite a good display because you can see both going on at the same time. And because we need to get out to this point, that means we need to, these lines here that we're seeing, the highlight lines, when they come close together, like on the edges, that's where you've got more curvature. When they're further apart, it's flatter. Here, look at the spacing of these compared with that. This is obviously flatter than that. So to make this flatter, we'll flatten that shape off, and that should bring these lines out. So if I take that outer point, it will bring those lines out. Obviously, it's going to bring it away from the data, but then we can bring that point down. Again, that's going to make it flatter. So it's heading more towards this end. Now the transition across there, it just feels like it's too sudden, that it comes down quite parallel and then goes across there. So I'm thinking maybe we should flatten this area here. So I'm going to bring that point up. And because it's now moving away from the data, we have to bring another point down. So I'll try and get that back to green in the middle. So I'm trying to get this line to go from, imagine that line goes from there and joins up to that point. That's what I'm trying to do, really. So we take that a bit further than we need. and then we'll take that outer point and see if we can flatten it off again. And you notice I'm not referring back to the mesh, because we're now in the area of really we're now creating something that's not going to be the same as the mesh, but at some point you have to deviate from the mesh in order to get the best results. I'm trying to get that line there not to be quite so, I don't want it just hooking at the last minute. So I'm going to try and flatten this a bit more so that these lines, the highlight lines, become wider. In other words, it gets flatter. Now it's got a bit of a weird shape now. It's going the wrong way. It's just a matter of trial and error, really, going backwards and forwards. Might even have to modify this one a little bit, or maybe I've just overdone it with that one. I put a bit more. I'm just watching that end bit. As I say, perfection can take a very long time, you know, and you just have to, sometimes you just have to be pragmatic about it. At some point, you just got to say that's enough's enough. Actually, those lines weren't quite pointing in the right direction. I'm going to just leave it like that. I mean, that's all within 0.5 of the mil. Now we want to do the similar thing on this one. We want to get these lines going into there and trying to get that red line. If we could get it exactly over that black line, that would be great. Probably highly unlikely, but I'm not sure how I'm going to do this even. I don't know which bits I'm going to pick, because we've got a lot of CVs on here, because we needed that to get that reasonably accurate to the back edge. So this is going to be fun. So if we look at these highlights here, these are wider than they need to be. In other words, it's too flat, so it needs to have a bit more curvature on it. So what we can do there is, if I start moving individual points, then we've got a lot of points to move. So what we want to do with that is to use, we have one CV, and then just got to try and get my head around this menu, which I still haven't really solved. So you got, this is what I was looking for, proportional modification. So it looks different to 2023, but it's the same principle, where you pick that point. Now what that allows you to do, and we've got symmetry on here, so you notice that point's moving as well. It allows you, at the minute it says 0 in this direction, it allows you to say that I want to move that point, I also want to move that point. I'll leave that point where it is, and you notice the same thing is happening on that side because of symmetry. And then I also want to move that point and that point, and then they'll all move. As I move this one, these will all move proportionally. Again, I've got lots of mouse sensitivity on here because we're doing pretty small changes, and I'm just going to bring that down. So I'm trying to get these lines here to come into this point. That's the first thing. So the fact that it's going, you know, it's digging into the outer surface. You can see the blue appearing. It's going out of the 0.5, but I do need to bring those highlights in, something like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this point. So I'm going to say I'm moving those points, but not the center one. Leave that one alone. Just move that one. See if I can get these lines the highlight lines to cross over. So I'm not looking at the deviation so much as the highlight lines at the minute. So we're getting these lines coming in at an angle, which is what I was trying to achieve, really. I'll go back to that one. You have to make sure that you're switching on the right things, because that was on 1 rather than 2, and just bring that down there. Now, obviously, I'm way off the other surface there now, because I've pulled those around. So I'll take proportional mod off and just put on move. I'm just going to move the whole hull. So I'm going to move that one so that we get back to the green on that edge. And this one as well. Whoa. Wasn't expecting that to all go so green. That was nice. So you can see the shapes, they're pretty close now. So I think I need to do a little bit more of proportional modification there. So I just do a single point proportional modification. I'm going to pick that point. So we'll go through a few loops of this, I'm sure. I just want to get these lines a bit closer. So we're too flat because those lines are too far out. They need to come in. So I need a bit more curvature on there. So I'm trying to do it with big moves like proportional modification and moving the whole hull rather than lots of individual points, because moving individual points, you then end up very quickly. Obviously, sometimes you do need to move individual points, but sometimes you end up very quickly getting the whole thing into more of a mess. I'm trying to keep some of the quality of the original surface. Now, the fact that these go around there and that looks a bit odd doesn't actually really matter, because we're only going to use this tiny bit of this surface anyway. It's just really down here that's going to matter. It's just if this all comes together, then we should have, hopefully, a much better result. Everything should just flow. No, I've made a mistake there because I've only got one on there. I really want that as well. I mean, you don't have to have both. Of course, you might decide that one is what you want, but those lines come together nicely now. Again, we're off the data, so I'm going to have to go and move the whole hull here, bring the green back. So by moving the whole hull, I'm keeping that shape across that one as well. Now, the fact that that's green isn't necessarily mean it's perfect at all, because the green is plus or minus 0.5, so we could be going up and down there. So we need to do a bit more of an investigation into there. Now, if you're, I mean, looking at this, I can't remember when I've ever actually done it this way, this sort of thing. All I know, the idea of putting the deviation on and the highlights like that, I can't remember when I've ever done that, but it seemed to work well. The important thing is trying to get some, use a method that gives you what you want, and you have to experiment with methods. And I'm always trying different ways of doing these things, because I don't think there's a perfect way of doing any of this. So I don't think I've ever used that particular combination particularly, but it seems to work, hopefully, or the proof will be when we actually do the final job. But those highlights look much better. They're sort of flowing nicely now. Now, if I take, when you've got the curves on, you have to say delete curves to get rid of them in here. And then when we switch to, say we switch to horizontal vertical, which I said is a very good way of checking whether these are whether you've got continuity or not. But it's so you can see where they're overlapping. They seem to be pretty good. Obviously, they're thinner lines on the outside edge, much like with isoline, where you've got more curvature. So we're not expecting those to be the same as that surface. Right, let's now try, and we might look back at just sections and just see what's going on there, see what those look like. So they look absolutely identical now, pretty much. The same in the Z direction, in the center at least. Oh, you can see actually if you zoom in on the Z sections, they're slightly different, but it doesn't matter. We're not looking for this to be within 0.001 of a mil or anything. It's just to get it as close as we possibly can before we start doing any other operations on it. So I've saved that. Now, one of the things I said about this surface is I didn't like the way I chopped it across on an X section. I think I just need to extrapolate it, or extend it rather, backwards. Now, what's in my originals there? I want to get rid of these because that's going to confuse when I go back. So the original was that one. I'm just going to delete that one. This is a big original. I don't really need that. That's not useful anymore. Plus, I've got it back in the old model. And then the other thing is we've got this surface that I've created here. Let's just take originals off. Yeah. So that's the surface that I want to use. That surface, which is in the originals, I'm going to delete. So when I say originals here, I'm just talking about these big block surfaces that I've used. I also noticed there's some curves on surface there, which they'll be dead. They won't, they're not relevant anymore. So I do need to delete those. Otherwise we'll get problems with trimming, or we might do. That was where I had this trimmed before, trim converted. I think that's the edge. That must be the edge where I had it. What is that? This is a curve, yeah. That curve we don't need. I think that's where, let's switch the old one on. Yeah, that curve's dead. So it's worth tidying up and just making sure things are on the right layers and stuff like that. So the original ones there, I haven't got anything in there at the minute, so I do want to copy that and that. Control C, Control V into there, just so that I've got a copy of those. So now if I do anything to these, I don't lose everything. Now what's in top? We've got a lot of stuff going on there. Let's just get rid of all the locators. Now we've got this joining surface there that we want. That was just detached from this original surface. So we've got that surface there. We've got a copy of it, so that's fine. So we've got that curve there, so we'll get rid of this joining surface, the old one. And then we'll just detach this. So we're going to Object Edit, Detach. It'll delete the history. I just snap to that curve there. I mean, the fact that it's not exactly the same doesn't matter. It's just that was the, well, in fact, I want to snap to the end of this curve. So I'll go and click on there. The curve doesn't join up, in fact, so it doesn't matter. So we should now have two surfaces where there was one. So this is going to be the surface that we're going to use to join this one to this one. So we've been through this before, of course, but we're just now going round it in a circle. This surface here, we could just keep that sized, I think. In fact, we don't need to do a trim convert on it. We could just trim it. I will do a trim convert because I've got the original there anyway. So instead of trim converting it across to a line, I'm just going to extend it backwards so that we end up with it somewhere close to here, something like that. So it's now a curved shape rather than straight as before. This one we need to trim to this edge, trim convert it to that edge. Let's get rid of that curve. We don't need that, not relevant. And I'll just hide that for a minute, get that out of the way. What have we got here? There's a curve there, we don't need that. So much stuff lying around. And then we'll do a trim convert on this one. Trim convert, project that into there. So that's what we've got at the minute, but we know that this isn't aligned. But now our highlights are coming in is quite subtle, but I just didn't like the way it was straight and then went off at a funny angle. There's more refinement you could do up here, but I'm not going to bother to do that because we'd just be there forever. Given more time, you know, we'd do that, but I don't want to waste too much time doing stuff that, you know, you could make more perfect. That's going to be G2 because these are detached, so they're always 100% accurate. This one definitely won't be G2 because all we've done is trim converted to that edge. But let's have a look and see how far out we are. So it's about 1.4 mil there. And I think that the reason for it being different, because I thought it might be a bit closer than that, to be honest. But the reason it's different is because we've only got degree 3 here and we've got a high degree here. So they'll never join up. And of course they won't join up because all we've done is do a trim convert on it. I'm just going to do this. If I extend that a bit further, and I'll get rid of that locator. If I change the degree of that, so let's just increase that a bit. Let's make it 5. And if we do another trim convert on that, I'm just curious as to see how good that is, considering we've done it all by eye so far. It's nothing, I haven't aligned that in any way. I'm just wondering how close we are there. So if I try and put G2 on there, so position wise it's only 0.4 of a mil, angle's 0.9. Obviously it's not going to be G2, but it's not too far away, which was the whole purpose of trying to overlap those two surfaces and get these as close as possible so that we don't have to do much in the way of alignment. So now we're going to do an align. Let's put these highlights on. This is the moment of truth. I'll put create curves on, just it's easier to see what's going on then. This is going to be the moment of truth, whether I've done a good job here or not. So let's go into object edit and we want to align. So we want G2 is going to be partial. Position influence, well, keep it at 0, which means that the CVs on here should stay more or less where they are, and see what we get. There will need to be some blending because we've got a higher degree than 5 here. So when I do G2, it's going to affect that hole and that hole, but not these ones. So we want those 2 extra rows in there. It's worth just doing it the way I do it. I never bother to count them, to be honest. I just do it. I can see I've got some more rows I want to include in the blend. So I'm just going to say blend extra CV rows 2, making sure I don't go into that one because that affects G2 that way. Worth putting G2 on that, putting the diagnostic on there just to make sure. Now it's not 100% accurate, but the gap is 0.001. Let's have a look at the highlights. So the highlights have screwed up a little bit here. The reason for that is because if you notice, and you'll notice if I put proxy display on, so proxy display shows us the original edges. You can see the edge is going that way. And the reason it's pulled that edge in is because we've got edge align on down here. We actually want skew on. So in other words, it comes off at the same angle. So now the highlights look a lot better. There's still a little bit of a wobble going through there. But we are going to put a surface over here. So hopefully that won't be an issue. The gap is 0.001. It's so close to where we want to be that if we just use a little bit of position influence, hopefully that will reduce. If I bring that up to 1, hopefully we'll get it below. So we can get it to 0.7 and it does that. If you want to, you can just put it on straight onto 1. Don't really like the way the CVs seem to be pulling in here. They've come from that point to that point. I don't like that. So if you want to restrain it even more, so you notice that these points have come in because that's the position influence is doing that. It's making the spacing of the CVs on this surface consistent with the spacing of the CVs on here. So you'd expect that, but these sort of curve in a funny S shape, and I'd really want to keep them pretty much as on the originals. So if we say vector in the Z direction, then that will hold those more or less where they were originally. The only one that is affected is that end one, which is because of the position influence. If you don't want that one to come in like that, then you'd have to keep the position influence of 0, but it does mean we haven't got position alignment there. But you can do that, and you could try increasing the degree. So increasing the degree is another way of getting that spot on here without having to move the CVs around. I think degree 6 across there is absolutely fine. It's a sort of blend surface between two quite different surfaces. So and actually the curvature, the highlights there look quite nice. I'm sure there's more room for improvement. I can see that wobbles a little bit, but I think when we cover that up, I'm hoping that that will go away and not be an issue. So I'm pretty happy with that. Usually these sort of intermediate blend surfaces, you do end up putting the degree up a little bit. Obviously, if you can keep it low, even better, but it's not always possible. So we'll take that off, delete all of those curves that we don't need, and then we could also look at horizontal, vertical, and just see how that sort of flows in space like that. And I'm quite okay with that. I think that's fine. Right, thank goodness for that. And breathe a bit of a sigh of relief that that sort of seems to have worked out okay. Now the other thing we've got to do is put this surface in on the side there. The curve needs updating because we've changed the surfaces. That curve no longer hangs off the bit that we wanted it to hang off. So let's put the side glass in there. And if you remember, I aligned that curve to align with the intersect of these surfaces. So some more cases of curves on surface there, which we want to get rid of, because if we don't, then we've got them hanging around and it's going to screw up the trimming later. So just delete them. And then we just make sure that those do intersect still. So those surfaces do seem to intersect the sides there. So let's go and put the intersects on there. So it's under surface edit, intersect, both surfaces. I'll leave create history on, but like I say, every so often you should delete the history because that can cause problems. So we've got the intersects on there. I'm now going to go into aligning that curve. So G2, I'll take all of these things off, like blending and partial and stuff. Not that they're relevant for curves, but if I pick that and then pick that curve on surface, doesn't matter which one of those I pick. And as I said before, if there's one arrow, we're okay, it's right on the end. If there's two arrows, it's not on the end, it's somewhere up here slightly. So just pull it back, and then if there's one arrow, we know we're exactly on the end. If you don't do that, then you can have all sorts of trouble later on trying to align things together. Let's just put that, just to confirm that we're still, it's always worth checking and checking and checking and checking at every single stage before you start doing anything else. So we've got that on there. We've got our curve in place there. Now the other thing we want to do is put this side surface in. So if I do, I'm going to say display visible because I think we've got it. So Alt V in my case. So we've got this surface here that we want to put into place. I'm sure I've got these on the wrong. Yeah, you see, I've got these on the wrong layers here, so I'm going to assign that to another thing worth updating. Just check what's on whip 1. So by turning it off, you can see what's on whip 1. So it's all that, those top surfaces. That's what I wanted. I'll put them back into top at some point. Sorry, my hand is giving up a bit in a minute. So I'm just going to get rid of that again. One thing that we ought to look at, so we've got this curve which is aligned. We haven't really sort of given much thought to the shape of that curve. We've aligned it to this edge here. Before this catches me out, this back edge, I know for a fact, isn't actually aligned to this edge here, and we need to make those consistent because it's not, things are going to break, otherwise we're going to mess things up. Now let's bring our mesh back in. Yeah, so we need a surface that goes all the way around here, but I know that if we look at the surface continuity here, the position, I know it's not 0. You know, we had that before. It's 0.18. It's the maximum gap there, and it's because the CVs on that are different to the CVs on this surface here. I could just try aligning that, but I'm pretty certain I've tried that, and but we certainly wouldn't want position influence of 1. It would screw things up. But I think we got as far as we could with aligning that. So it's breaking. It says breaking history. There'll be history because it's because of symmetry. I think would be the reason there. It's going to be a partial edge into there, and I'm sure that's as far as we could get. Yeah, it's 0.114, so we got a bit closer, but no better really. So let's undo that. So sometimes, you know, we've done that. We've got the spacing of the CVs here consistent with the spacing of the CVs here, but now we've got another surface where the spacing isn't quite consistent. So what we could do there is, instead of trying to align this to that, we could align this to that, but of course it's a longer length. But what we'll do, we'll try doing that. I'll make a copy of that. So I'm just doing Control-C, Control-V, and then we'll just use extend on one of them. Doesn't matter which one. And we'll bring that back to this point here. So if I do Control-Alt on that edge and come down to there, it'll actually drag it to that point. Now I want that symmetric, so I'll do the same thing on this end. Do Control-Alt down to there and just drag it to that end. So we've got that. So I don't know how this is going to work out. We'll find out in a minute. So I'll take the CVs off there, and then we can align that back surface to this surface, this upper surface. Now again, we're going to have exactly the same problem because we haven't changed anything. We've got position influence to 0, so those points aren't changing. We could try increasing the degree. It's not made much difference, 0.15. We might as well keep it on 7 because we've got 7 on this one. If we made the position influence of 1, then of course they'll join up exactly, so we get position alignment there. But you can see what's happening to the CVs there. It's rubbish. It's bending it. So we wouldn't want that. But what we can do, because there's nothing holding this bottom edge exactly where it is at all, what we can do there is use blending. We can blend all the way across. So if I say extra rows, not just this first one, but the second one as well, then it moves these points as well as the middle ones. Again, it's still coming off at a funny angle. They're not consistent. The middle ones look not too bad, but this one's weird. I'll take proxy display off. But what you can do there is just to use blend factor. We've got blend factor of 1, which is what we've used up to now. But if you change the blend factor down to 0, you can see what happens. It actually moves this point. So it's, by having a blend factor of 0, it's almost like moving a surface based on a curve. And it's incredibly powerful because now we've got the spacing that we had before, but we've moved all of the CVs along to be consistent with this surface. Obviously we've got this little bit of an end which we need to get to, but if I just come out of there and we were to look at the difference between those two edges, that one and the original edge, you'd find that they're not going to be that different, or they certainly don't look that much different. So if I say curve to curve, that one to that edge there, it's actually, it looks like it's 0, amazingly, which is a surprise. So let's make that symmetric. So object symmetric, and then we'll extrapolate that, extend it rather. One button or something. Yeah, extend that, and it'll extend the other end as well. No, this is where it's not going to work. You can see what's happening. It's because the spacing of the CVs is different, or it's bunched towards the outside edge. It's actually screwing up there. It's wrapping up on itself. That's a shame. Let's have a look back at the mesh. I mean, one way of getting around that is just to put in trim convert this surface in here and align it there, and that might be perfectly fine, to be honest. Yeah, I think we just do that. It's a fairly small area. It's not the ideal solution, I think, but it's a practical solution that would work. So I'm just going to do that. So we'll just do a trim convert on that. I mean, if I wanted to, I suppose I might copy that into originals. So I've just got the big surface in case I ever need to go back. And as you've seen before, it was a good job I did keep those original surfaces on in the other cases. So I'll just convert that bit. Now that's not going to be aligned there, or highly unlikely that it'd still be aligned, because obviously we changed that middle one. So let's see what it is. So it's 0.4 degrees. So let's just go into align. We put G2 on there to there, and if you want to make it nice and soft there, you might drop the degree of that, because it's such a small surface. You really don't need degree 5. You might even decide that degree 3 is okay, you know, and then we just keep that point where it is. And if I bring the original back in, it doesn't look different, does it? And that'll be fine. So wherever you can reduce the degree, then do it, because the more CVs you've got to deal with, the more difficult the job is, to be honest.